I like to consider this a special edition recording. With us today, we have Zephie Villalobos. Zephie, I think this is special for two reasons. One is you have achieved sort of that rare achievement. You were a cohort 14 young scholar, 2019 college scholar, and then now you're a current graduate scholar at the Icon School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City. And so you've experienced and are currently experiencing sort of all three of our programs. Extra special because your cohort 14 was the first incoming cohort of young scholars when I first became an educational advisor. That was December 1st, 2014. So about a week away from being 10 years. I've known you for 10
Wait,
years.
that's crazy.
So first, welcome to the
Thank
Young Scholar
you.
Conversation series. I want to bring us back, right? There's so much to talk about. I want to talk about what your time in the Young Scholars program meant, what your time in high school meant. There's so much to those years, I think. But maybe like let's go back into the memory bank. You were just notified that you were a young scholar that fall of 2014 before I came down, and I know that we went out to dinner with your family. What sort of went through your mind at that very, very early stage?
I like vividly remember going to PF Chang's when you came
Yes.
to visit. Um, and I think one of the things going through my mind was just kind of being speechless. I like didn't even know what to say. I was so intimidated. I was so nervous. Um, it seemed like insane that someone would fly to Houston to like come and meet me. And like I had really no idea what was like in store. And I remember inviting I think it was my uncle.
Yeah.
I don't remember if my aunt went, but I know my uncle went for sure. And I think that that meant a lot to me that you also met him. Because he's been like a really important part of my life. And I think I was just very much like, I felt like this was like a big transition in my life, and I just had actually no idea what it was gonna be like.
Yeah, like sitting with that feeling too, because I remember it was my one of my first dinners, and you're sitting there looking around like, what is this? I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I hope I know what I'm doing. And so there was sort of that fun, I think, dynamic that we were both testing out sort of this space.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, being so young, I mean, it is a big thing. Hopefully, it's added up to something big. But going through sort of those early moments where there's just probably a lot of questions, a lot of confusion, how did you sort of allow that maybe sediment to settle in your brain to figure out what this might be?
My mom helped me a lot through it, for sure. I think she was like one of my really like huge guiders throughout like the whole process. Um, and I think she really explained it a lot like better, like these they're like gonna help you and like she also was obviously confused exactly like what it entailed, but I think she made me feel a little bit better. She was like, you don't need to feel nervous around him, like he's here to help you. Um, Even though like she also was like a little bit nervous, but she was like, it'll be really good and like I think that that helped. I think my relationship with my mom like helped me a lot actually. Her just kind of being like, it's okay to be like nervous, but like keep going because this like you need this.
Yeah.
um yeah, that helped a lot.
Which is such an important point, right? Because our program, it's just as much a connection and partnership with a parent as it is with the young scholar until the young scholar maybe gets more comfortable and sort of takes ownership a
Yeah.
little bit more of the program.
And my mom has said that before, like, because I always tell her thank you, so much because I wouldn't be where I'm at without her. And she always thanks the foundation because she's like, I learned so much from going to the not Scholars Weekend. Um, and she was like, they taught me so many things that I didn't even know that like I could do to help you. And so, yeah, so it was also like so much for me, but also so much for her.
Which it comes full circle because I think with advisors, it then helps us recognize sort of what role we're supposed to play and kind of a little bit of self-discovery. And so I often thank my scholars and the families for allowing me to be a part of that the last 10 years. If we go back to high school for a moment, and we can talk about it in the context of our program, but maybe just the high school years. It's equal parts thrilling and daunting and confusing, challenging. I mean, there's so much entailed, I think, in those 4 years. Um, Maybe go back to an early moment and talk us through like high school itself, beginning that journey. Maybe there are moments of doubt that sort of creep up into your mind. I think doubt is probably a common factor with many of our scholars in dealing with that. Just how did you maybe handle those moments of doubt to remain hopeful that, hey, if I stay the course, this will add up to something big?
I think a lot of it was you, because like my mom was the first in our family to graduate high school, and even then, like she went straight into like working, and academics was never really like a big priority because she had to go and help my grandma or like she had other commitments, like her little siblings and stuff. And so I remember always feeling really overwhelmed, and my mom was always a really good like emotional support. And she would always be asking me like how is school going, like if there was anything that she could do. But it was a lot of emotional support, and I think like realizing like it was all leading up to something, and like like the stress and like the pressure was like for an end goal was always when like we would meet and we would kind of debrief on like I'm really struggling with this class, and like you would help me kind of navigate and like see the bigger picture. That helped a lot. I think in school, I had a really nice guidance counselor who she also helped me, but that wasn't more until like the college application years.
Yeah.
But my high school counselor, like she was really good. She actually was my PE coach in elementary school, which was
Nice.
like a funny full circle. And so she we like had known each other for a little bit. But I would say mostly through the foundation and like you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so kind. I remember those conversations early on. Do you remember the conversation? It was swimming that you called me. You were feeling sort of overwhelmed. You had taken on this interest, but didn't think that maybe you wanted to do it anymore, that
Yeah.
there might have like a natural conclusion to this interest. I think a lot of scholars struggle in those moments to recognize interests kind of come and go. High school is the time to test them out. It's also the time maybe to conclude a few or know when it's time to
Yeah.
conclude. Do you remember that moment and maybe like talk us through sort of what was going through your head as much as you can remember?
I I really remember that was like a big turning point in like swimming for me because swimming I've been swimming since I was like 7 years old. Like that was my sport growing up, and it was not even just like a sport, it was just like I when I swim, it's like my way to get away from the world. And so like that decision to leave swim team was like so difficult, but I think that the environment of the swim team in my high school in particular was really toxic. And I think grappling with like how it was difficult to balance with band and with academics. And I wanted to actually take the medical courses that my high school offered. Um, I remember being really like, um, it was really troubling to try and like make that decision.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, I knew that I could always like go and swim on my own. And it was more toxic than like I wanted to, like to be in like on the swim team. And I won like I had kind of lost like love for the sport because it just became so competitive, and like that's not what I wanted. And so I realized that I also did really want to explore medicine. And so yeah, that was a really difficult decision, but it ended up working out like for the better. So
Yeah. That moment, it's like an indelible mark in my mind. And maybe this is why I also invited you on. It's like talking to you, there's also moments of gratitude that go through my mind because it helped shape the advisor, who I am, who I was becoming then, who I hope that I still am, at least a version of today for my scholars. But I remembered in that conversation, you were very honest. And I think you were even a little bit emotional. I remember getting off the call being like, I hope I handled that okay. But I think stemming from that conversation, it really reinforced the importance of honesty, especially between scholar and advisor. I do think that's one of the special pieces, of course, of our program. Obviously, I'm very biased having done it for 10 years, but in that moment, I recognized if advisors are going to have any sort of influence or effect, positive effect on scholars, honesty really needs to be part of the equation. And I think you taught me that pretty vividly. Maybe for those younger scholars out there, can you talk a little bit about how important it is to be honest, not just with your advisor, but teachers, parents, just your larger network as you're sort of on that young path of self-discovery?
Yeah, it's super important. I think that especially in the younger years, it's like when you can explore and actually like figure out what you love.
Yeah.
And I think like if you're not honest to yourself about like if you're actually enjoying what you're doing or what you're learning, like you can get stuck in a path that's like this is actually not what I really love to do, and like it can spiral into like for example, like if I hadn't really explored medicine and I like just wanted to go into med school and I just took like the pre-med classes, then I feel like if I got to med school and I didn't like it, like it would not all the struggles that I'm going through right now like would not be worth it if I didn't love medicine. But I think because like I was honest to myself about like swimming had not it had turned into something that like I didn't really love like the way I used to, and I was able to take those like pre-med or like health science courses, and then I got to go and shadow in hospitals and I got to go and like go into clinics. And so I think a lot of times like being honest with yourself about what you love and what you really don't love, or even if you like don't like it a little bit, like it's not worth the time to like invest. Like there's something out there that's gonna be like for you, and I think being honest is like the way to like open those doors. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. Is there a moment too, and this might be difficult because our program, it entails so much, right? It's pretty comprehensive. I think the supports that we can bring to the table, but we also strive to make it individualized and figuring out how to leverage our resources and our support for each scholar. Was there, it could be a summer program, a community event in your time in the Young Scholars Program. Senior Summit, I know, I think kicked off with your cohort especially. Was there a moment during your time in the Young Scholars Program that felt like a little bit of a turning point in helping you think about what was possible for the future?
I'm trying to think of all my summer programs that I did.
I have written down a few of them.
I think I know. The first one was Explo. I remember that. And I
Correct.
think that that was the turning point of when I really like saw the spark in medicine.
Yeah.
Um, I remember I took a it was a chemistry course, I think. I really, really liked that one. And then I took a So You Want to Be a Doctor.
Yeah.
And that was the course that I was like, oh my God, this is all so fun. Um, and I even stayed afterwards with like this, like the course like teacher. I don't know, I think she was a student, I don't remember. But and like we stayed and like kept dissecting like the fetal pig that we were dissecting that day because I just like wasn't done. Like I wanted to keep going. And I think all of my summer programs really taught me a lot about like what I was interested in and what I didn't. And I think like to this day, a lot of people were like, "How did you know that you wanted to go into medicine?" And I was like, it was like a process of like elimination of other things.
Right.
Because I did like at Brown, the summer at Brown, I did computer science like and neuroscience together. And then that's when I realized that I hated computer science. And I was like, that's not for me, but I really loved when we would do like brain anatomy.
Yeah.
And then I know the next year, or yeah, I think the next year was the mini med school. And that was when I was like, oh wow, because I think you had found it just like by research.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a typical program that like, scholars went to, and it was just like so looking back at it now, I think whenever I was there, because I had no idea what to expect or I had no idea what like med school entailed. Looking back at it now, I'm like, oh my God, we were really like doing like med school to like obviously like a baby level, but it was like really incredible to have that experience, and
Yeah.
like I wasn't so lost coming into med school, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um and it was just very like a it felt it meant a lot to me that you found it, and like the whole process like also just was like, okay, yeah, for sure this is what I want in the
Yeah.
future.
It's so funny. It's bringing me back because that was back in the times. I mean, our program has gone through a few iterations, but we would do like individual searches for individual scholars. We've now made it more community-based, community programs. And we like to think that we have an umbrella of interest that we can cater to. But I
Mhm.
remember those days really. You're like, I want to go to med school maybe. And I'm just like mad Googling, going, oh my gosh, what can I find? Was that at Rochester?
It
I think
was.
that was up in New York.
Mhm.
Um, Going to Explo, I remember that too. Now we bring the ninth graders, the rising ninth graders, together to what we call first summer for their first summer
Mhm.
experience. Back in your day,
Oh my
back in your day,
God.
we would finish welcome weekend, and then you all would just fly to different
Mhm.
parts of the region. Expo was probably up in New England. That's bringing me back, Expo.
Yeah.
Um, you're on a plane, you're flying away from home, your mom leaves from welcome weekend to go home. That's gotta rattle the brain in some ways. Like what goes through your mind?
I sobbed on the plane to Mexico.
Oh no. Oh no.
I, but yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
really close with my mom, and I think physically seeing her walk away from me was probably one of the hardest things like I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like, is like at that age, obviously. But it was like it for the first time, I think, was like, oh my gosh, like my mom and I are two separate, like she's not always gonna be with me.
Yeah.
And I think it was really difficult. And I would cry every summer that I would leave, but I cried a little less each
Yeah.
summer. And I think it really showed me that I can be like my own person, and it made me more independent like while I was traveling. Like I remember the first summer my mom like made a whole folder with like all of my travel documents, like all my plane itineraries, like everything that she was like, you need to hold this all like 24/7 until you get to, where you're getting. And like now I feel like because I had all that experience, and she honestly like made me so prepared and organized like when I fly, that it just like it's really um, it's just like I know it so well, but I think that leaving her at the very beginning was really difficult. Um, and coming back, it's always like, oh my God, I'm really, really excited to come home.
Yeah. It's such a big moment too, right? So you're stopping on like how long does it take you to then acclimate? Maybe in that like first summer, if we stick with that specific memory, that's got to be jarring, but is there a happy ending? And like what happens at the end maybe of that first summer coming home? What does it do for you, for your self-awareness, for this idea of self-confidence? I'm curious how that sort of imbues the individual.
Oh my God, I love these questions. I haven't ever thought about this. But I remember I think it took me about like the first 4 or 5 days to kind of get used to it. I think it helped that the program I went to took away our phones for the first week.
Yeah,
And I think that it forced me to like make friends in a setting that I had never really had to make friends like that before.
right.
Or it just like forced me to kind of like sit with myself. Like I would like and have like the roommate there. Like whenever I was laying down in bed, I like took a journal because like I wanted to remember everything. I don't think I really stuck to the journal. I think my first few days it was just like I'm so sad. And then I was like, I'm gonna stop journaling. But I remember um it was probably like 4 or 5 days into it, and like I was like, this is really fun. Like I get to go here and do this when I want to. I like have to go do my laundry or like all these things that I was like, it felt very grown up, but I was what, like 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah.
And so I think that by the end of the 3 weeks, I felt like a totally different person. It was like, oh my gosh, like I can do a lot of things that like I never really thought about like doing by myself. Or I can be put in a totally new environment and like have to make friends, and like that's okay. Um, and it really just like forced, especially because I was really, really introverted whenever I was younger, and I think it really pushed me out of my shell. And that was really nice.
Yeah. And I only know this because we spoke not too long ago, but maybe for the audience, presumably this prepared you to then travel and acclimate to new communities many times over. And so if we do sort of, let's sort of fast forward into the future a little bit before we go back to high school. How has that moment or those moments transitioning into summer programs? Who is Zephie the traveler these days?
Yeah, she's a big traveler.
She's a big traveler.
She's a big traveler. Yeah, so I think that because I did the summer programs, I honestly had a huge like desire to go study abroad whenever I got to college. And so I went to study abroad in Barcelona and I lived in Barcelona for 7 months. Um, and during that, like we took weekend trips and we like traveled to so many places with like some of my friends. And I think that was still very much like, oh, I met friends from Brown at my summer program and we would go travel together. And I think that that felt very similar to like summer programs. It felt like an extended summer program almost. And so that was like a really amazing experience. And to go like outside of the US or like across, the Atlantic or like just somewhere far away that's like not Mexico, 'cause my family and I would go to Mexico a lot. But somewhere that like I didn't really know the culture at all was really eye-opening to like see that there's a whole nother world outside. Because I remember when I went to like summer programs, I was like, oh my God, like not every place is like Texas. And then like I went to Barcelona, I was like, not every place is like the US. Um, and then I think after like studying abroad, I knew that I wanted to take a gap year before med school to travel. And so I backpacked for 3 months in Europe after graduating. And then I spent some time at home. And then I spent 3 months backpacking Mexico because I wanted to get more in touch with my culture and like see family who I hadn't seen in 10 years. And so I went backpacking across like the whole country and it was just like so beautiful. And I definitely don't think that I would have had the courage to do that had it not been for like me being pushed to like go to summer programs and like step out of my comfort zone in that way. Because I tell people that I like started traveling alone when I was 13, 14 years old. And to think about it in that context is like, oh my gosh, like I
Crazy.
was. Um, but And so they're like, "Oh my God, I can't even imagine." And they're like, "My parents would never let me do that whenever I was younger." But my mom was so encouraging and like the foundation gave so much encouragement and support that it was like it really just like shaped a large amount of like who I am now.
I think like what you're describing is probably at the core of what our program strives to be. Again, there's the support element. Of course, there's so many pieces of it, but one is encouraging young people to put themselves in new positions, to figure out how to acclimate and become just kind of different versions of themselves, hopefully better versions. But like to what you said earlier, to discover what you do like, and arguably more important, to discover what you do not like. To go back to your mom for a moment, you've referenced her a couple of times. She was always so kind to me during the program. Might be hard to answer this question through the lens of your mom's eyes, but to the best of your ability, how has your mom seen you transform? And of course, not to pry into private conversations, but what does your mom sort of take away from the Zephie of, 2014 to now the Zephie of 2024?
I'm actually curious what she has to say about this, but just not like I think literally yesterday she told me that every time I come home from being away, I seem more of like an adult.
Yeah.
And I think that what she would say is that like I was very shy and very much like I kept to myself and I was always very like intimidated. And I think that she's seen over the years that like my confidence has grown, that my desire for adventure has grown, that like what I want out of the world and what I want to give to the world has like largely been shaped by like the programs that I have experienced and like the school that I went to and getting the help that I have gotten. And I think that she she's always very appreciative to the foundation because I would not have the mentality or and we wouldn't have like the mentality that we have or be in like the situation that like we are in. And I think that she anytime I mention JKCF, she has like a very like soft spot in her heart for it, and she just like is really appreciative that I am like who I am today because of it. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers the
Yeah,
question.
no, absolutely. And again, I go back to this idea of it being cyclical, that watching you all become different versions of yourself helps me to then advise the next cohort of young scholars. And so you all are always so kind and generous with your praise of the foundation And of course, that's understandable. But I always like to turn it back and say, foundation wouldn't be here without all of you. And figuring out how we become better versions of ourselves in our program is largely having seen and witnessed the transformations that you all go through. The great stuff and then the challenging stuff as well. To pull it back for a moment, look, you've referenced it early on in the program. There's a lot of confusion, probably middle of high school. And I think you said it best at the start. You have to figure out what you do like through a process of elimination. And then all of a sudden in high school, there's this college process that comes and it looms and it's big and it's probably scary. Um, we have cohorts right now, it's our 21s, our juniors about to enter into college counseling, and really our cohort 20s that have gone through college applications in the midst of college application season. That's a heavy time for a young person. Bringing yourself back to this moment of trying to connect high school with dream futures and going through that process, how did you handle sort of what might be, a pressure-filled process?
I remember feeling really stressed with like all the applications. And I think that for me, it was probably my family. Um, and I think the extracurriculars, honestly, that I was involved in had a lot to like, because I was involved in HOSA, which was like a medical
Yeah.
organization. And I think that like we did a lot of volunteering for like different walks for different diseases. And I think like that also kept me like, okay, I know that this is what I want to do. And so like at the end of it all, like it will be okay. And again, my mom has been like my backbone through the whole thing. And so like my mom was a big support system. Um, but I think that trying to remind myself that I am going to go to college. Like I'm a great applicant. I'm gonna get in somewhere at least and
Yes.
like everything will be okay. Um and just kind of like that reassurance and like when I tend to get overwhelmed when I have a lot of things to do and so I think looking back I didn't handle it so well, but I think I would like now break it up piece by piece. But yeah.
I remember too when your decisions were coming out as well. You had
Right.
sort of not resign, that's the
Yeah.
improper. You were like getting comfortable with going to a very strong, prominent university in Texas. You were like, I think this is where. I said, were there any more to say? Well, there's like one, but you were like, it's not going to happen. And I remember, I think it was the last one. You opened up this email probably late at night. Like, walk us through that moment and not just about going to Brown University. But in that moment where you're with yourself, those words flash across the screen. It's got to be fulfilling in some way. But you tell us.
Yeah, I figured you were gonna bring this up. Um,
I was like, just
it's
wait. You were like, it ain't gonna happen. I'm like, just wait.
um, I think that yeah, I was really set on going to this school in Texas. I was like,
Yeah,
it's fine, like that's gonna happen. It's great. And because I was getting like rejection after rejection. I think it was all rejection. I don't remember. But I had waited 3 days after Brown had released the decision. Um, and I was just like taking care of one of my cousins. My great grandma was over like making food with like some of my aunts and uncles. And I was taking care of my little cousins, and I just like randomly decided that I wanted to like open the decision. I was like, I'm just gonna get it over with, see that they said no, and then like move on with my day. And
Uh,
so then I open it and I see something that says like welcome to Brown University. And I was like, that's like like that's not right because I hadn't actually opened the letter yet. And I was like, that I don't know what they're talking about.
they're just being
And
nice.
so, and so then I opened the letter and it like confetti popped out with like with these people holding the class of 2023 like running across like this like the email or whatever. And I was just like, that's not right. And I like got out of it and I logged back in. And so then like it like said the same thing, obviously. And so
Yeah.
then I got up and I just started like shouting like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh." And like my whole family was like really concerned because I was just like shouting. And my mom was like, "What's happening? Like, what happened?" And I was like, "I got into Brown." And she was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, and I was like, "I think so." She was like, "Let me see." And so then I like logged in again and she was like, "Oh my gosh." And so then like once my mom like had like realized that I like got into Brown too, I think I just like I literally fell down like to my knees and I just started like crying tears of joy. And also like I was trying to be so positive. I remember like throughout the whole process, but like every single rejection was like, "Oh my God." Like I'm like, "This is so brutal."
Yeah,
Um and Brown was like my top choice. Like that was the school I wanted to get into. And I was like, if I can't get into these other schools, like how am I gonna get into Brown? Like I just like it's just not gonna happen. And so whenever I got into it, it was just like these huge like pressure off my shoulders and just like these like tears of like, oh my God, like I did that. Like I'm gonna go to my dream school and it's gonna be like so incredible and I'm so excited. And like it was just emotion overload. I just like was like sobbing on the ground and
yeah,
like all my it was really beautiful that like all my family was there and they were all like, "Oh my gosh, she got into like the school of her dreams," and like they were really happy for me too.
that's
But yeah, so it
yeah.
was that's one of my favorite memories ever, yeah.
Yeah, and for me too, because you're right that there is a painful side of the college process, right? So you have to be vulnerable, submitting applications. There's always the chance of hearing that unfavorable news, and that's a real hit to one's confidence. And so for my young scholars, like that moment of celebration, I think it's awesome because it is Brown. It's a school that you did want to go to, but it also hopefully is a reminder that everything that you've put yourself through is adding up to something. And I hope that those lessons, and presumably so, I mean, again, you're a college scholar, you're a grad scholar, now you're in med school, you've wanted to go to med school for a really long time. Hopefully that pattern sort of repeats itself and you continually remind yourself, like, yeah, like I'm good. I'm good at this stuff. And I'm going to continue to figure out a way to sort of forge and create my future. Does that happen like when you get into med school? I mean, is there a similar response in your mind to and again, it's not to be self-congratulatory, but it's to recognize that what you're putting yourself through is adding up to something big.
Yeah, for sure. I had a different kind of pathway going into med school. I got accepted into an early assurance program. But even whenever I started that, I was like, oh, this is gonna be like my practice for like actual med school applications. And then I actually got an interview and I was like, well, that's weird. Like, okay, I'll practice for interviews. And then I got into the program and I was like, "Oh my God, like these people think I deserve to be a doctor." And like it was at a school that I hadn't like I was so set on coming to Texas for med school for like family for like the Texas Medical Center for like a variety of reasons. But I like researched more of this school and it just seemed like perfect and aligned with like all of my interest about like health inequities and like social like determinants of health and like all these things that it just like that acceptance was like, I'm gonna be like a really good doctor because this school focuses so much on this and they recognize that like I'm also really passionate about all of this. And I think after I got into flex med, that's the only reason I got to like study abroad and just like the accumulation of things was like I'm like really preparing myself to be a very well-rounded doctor and it all just kind of clicked after that acceptance. It was like, okay, I can do this. And I got into med school and it's stressful, but I just constantly remind myself, like, I can do this. Like, I have been doing it, I'm still doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah.
Which is such an important voice, right? The voices in our minds, like the doubt's always going to be there. Those
Yeah.
voices are usually amplified and they're plentiful, but having
Yeah.
that one voice say, no, you can do this, you can do this. I mean, it harkens back to like children's stories, but like I think that voice is so important to constantly remind yourself that it's there and present. Um, Not to put you on the spot, I like to do a little bit of an advice thing at the end. So I was curious. Again, this is for young scholars and their families. Maybe if we go back, and I'll put them sort of in three categories. Maybe current eighth graders coming into the program. We just hosted Welcome Weekend for cohort 24s, um, and it was a great event. Looking back now, what kind of advice would you offer up to eighth graders coming into our program, eager, but perhaps nervous and a little bit doubtful about the future?
Um, I think that it's good to be eager. I think that the excitement is really good and that the nerves are normal. And I think leaning into the nerves and like really confiding in the foundation and like the advisors are really like that's I think what got me through it all. Um, and just like being open to any opportunity that like comes your way. I think that that to me was really, really helpful to not try and be to try and not be narrow-minded because there are so many things, so many possibilities, um, that like of exploration, of just like advice, of wisdom, of like life experiences, um, that since the foundation is so large, you know, that like we have access to. Um, I think that that's one thing, like leaning into like the nervousness and like fueling it into like, what can I do with it? Like I'm, you know, stuff like
Nice. That's great. Let's move to the ninth and the 10th graders then, right? Kind of wading through high school.
that.
You're starting to piece some stuff together, but maybe it's not going as smoothly as one thought it would. What would you give to those scholars that are sort of nearing the middle of their high school career?
That is a tough time. I I think that not muting, what is the word? Like kind of blurring out all of the pressures of like external factors. I think that I felt that a lot my first 2 years of like, oh my God, GPA, oh my gosh, rank, oh my gosh, I am gonna have to like take the SAT or the ACT. And I think kind of knowing that those things like are true and like they are important because it's college applications and it's just how the world works, but also what's more important is that you're happy and you're finding things that you love because I think one of the things that I've realized through all my applications is that the places that you want to go to are going to see the people who are passionate about important things and who actually have a passion and are not like checking things off because they feel like they need to be. And I think that making sure in those first 2 years, you know, like you're exploring and you're actually finding or trying to find your passion. It's like so difficult so early on to actually find your passion, but I think trying to find your passion is going to come across in like the future years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And then those 11th and 12th graders, the ones that are already thinking about the future, the heavy burden that that can weigh on someone's shoulders, what would you say to the maybe older young scholars in the program?
I think for that, it's just, I would have really loved, I think, a lot of reassurance from my own self to be like, everything is going to be okay. Like, I think that there's so much like pressure and stress about wanting to get into XYZ school or feeling that like you need a certain score or like a certain um, grade on an exam or in like a course. And I think that as long as like you give full effort and like are trying your best, you know, like that's gonna come across and like at the end of the day, like it's gonna be okay. Like no matter where you go, it's gonna be okay. And like you make the most of like any situation.
Nice. I'd have one more. Let's say it's another 10 years into the future. So, oh my gosh, that's going to be the year 2034. That feels sci-fi, right?
Right.
Um, and let's say you get interviewed again. What is one piece of advice you might want to offer up to your future self based off of how you're feeling right now?
Oh wow. Um, I think just never forgetting to be grateful and to be present. I think a lot of growing up, I've always felt like, oh, I have to think about the future or I'm reminiscing about the past or things like that. And I think, like, just the other day, I was thinking about how in 10 years, if I decide to, like, do a specialty that interests me, I'm gonna be done in 2034. And I think that I was like, okay, you know what? Let's take a step back. And like right now you're in your first semester of med school and like you're still exploring and you're meeting a bunch of like really amazing people and like you have a lot of amazing people in your life and like you're getting to experience all these things. And I think what I would tell myself in 10 years is to like make sure I stay present and like be very grateful for like what is happening in my life at the moment.
Nice. That's perfect. Zephie, I mean, that's a perfect segue too. I'll just offer up sort of one last message of gratitude. I am grateful for our partnership all of these years. Again, I said versions of it throughout this conversation, but I look back on our partnership and it largely helped me to, I think, become the advisor that I've become over these last 10 years. And I think our work and my work with some other scholars too, all scholars, it really helps to continue to frame our program sort of for the next generation of young scholars coming up. So I'm super, super grateful that we had that semi-awkward dinner at PF Chang's, just kind of both looking, saying, "What is this?" But much to your message right now, it was all okay, and it definitely worked out. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your life for the last 10 years. I'm really grateful for
Mhm.
that.
Thank you for agreeing to be a part of my life for the last 10 years and for like always being just a very constant rock. So I'm really appreciative of you and the foundation.
Thank you so much. Zephie Villalobos, oh my gosh, now in med school. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.